So as I worked through my own sort of healthcare journey, I came out the other side with a sense that my AnyTech days were over and my HealthTech days were coming together, because that was the turning point for me where I realized that I really wanted to play a role in helping with the systems.
Yianni Serpanos is a passionate and driven digital health innovator within the health tech industry. As CEO and founder of the digital health patient and practice management software coreplus and executive director of a collaborative health tech startup community called HealthTechX, Yianni brings over 24 years of startup, commercial and software development experience into the sector and acts as a catalyst for meaningful technical and cultural change towards what he describes as a world of integrated digital health empowerment for all people. Beyond his work in the digital health industry, Yianni is also a popular speaker on the topic of digital health innovation, sharing his insights and expertise through his Reimagining Healthcare podcast. Welcome to Hacking Health. This podcast is for future-focused health experts, thought leaders and change makers who are interested in making health accessible for everyone, because together we can get to the future faster. What makes you smile, Yianni?
Besides being interviewed by you, Sarah?
Besides that.
Besides that, I'd say it's my daughter. She's 7. Actually just turned 7 last week. And everything about her makes me smile.
Aww.
And I'm looking forward to continuing that.
I know.
Hence why the unicorn over my shoulder, because that's her unicorn. She's really into horses and unicorns. And you'll probably notice there's a bean bag and there's a little T-Rex, which is actually an outfit that can be worn with some sort of overall. Fantastic. So Electra comes in and out of my office from time to time when she's not at school.
That's pretty cute.
It's fantastic. It's great. I'm just delighted to be able to have a life like this where I can be working, but also living with her, with the life, the family, etc. It's fantastic.
So good. Can you tell us something about yourself that most people don't know?
I would say, all right, I'm a fastidious car detailing enthusiast.
Oh.
So some people like to play golf. Other people ride bikes. Me, I like to clean our cars in ways that most people wouldn't think about.
Do you have any hacks?
Use the right chemicals and things will usually go pretty well. I'm very procedural. I've got a routine on how I go about cleaning the car. I would say use products that minimize the amount of contact you put with, don't use chamois, don't put sponges on your Duco, get good quality microfiber towels, and let the products do most of the work.
I've had a feral possum go like bananas all over my car recently. I'm struggling with that.
Well, you got to get whatever that possum left behind off the Duco as soon as possible.
I think it's a high pressure. It's the Karcher time, I think.
I think so. And also get yourself something that's called a rinseless wash and dilute that with water 256 to 1. Spray it onto whatever the possum left behind as soon as possible and just get that stuff off so it doesn't etch your paintwork.
I know. I'm really worried. I've got to do that tonight. Can't leave it there for 1 minute longer.
Otherwise, you'll be respraying the car at some point.
I know. It's terrible. What was your dream job when you were a child?
Look, this might sound a little bit cliche, but I'm doing it. I didn't know it was going to be exactly what it is today, but my family migrated to Australia and they operated small business, and I grew up in that type of small business environment. So I knew I wanted to be in business. And as time went on, that words associated with that sort of transformed, sort of in terms of entrepreneur or startup founder. So I think I'm living that dream. But I think in parallel, I'd probably say as I sort of got into that 8, 9, 10 year, I like the idea of being an Air Force pilot. Obviously I didn't do that.
No. When did you first get interested in digital health?
Okay, so that one was prior to getting involved in digital health. I was actually involved in incubating startup ideas in what I called any tech. And that was a very strenuous part of my life. I didn't know it at the time, but I was incubating a lot of tech businesses covering managed IT, telecommunications, virtual internet services. And I experienced a health crisis. I had what some people would call a burnout, but I think it was a little bit more intense than that. And that presented some questions that I needed to answer. And that's when I started interacting with healthcare, the healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually quite surprised how difficult it was to receive healthcare. Now, it was one of those things that on a one on one level, I was dealing with some great practitioners who, if the service I needed only was constrained to any one of them, it would have been okay.
Yes.
But working across multiple disciplines in multiple locations with multiple programs and ideas in play, there was no coordination. It was really left for me to try and bring all that information together and synthesize it and make it work for me in particular. And I was actually quite confronted by that. So as I worked through my own sort of healthcare journey, I came out the other side with a sense that my any tech days were over and my health tech days were coming together, because that was the turning point for me where I realized that I really wanted to play a role in helping with the systems and the technology that was needed to try and overcome some of the problems that I was experiencing. So, having lived those problems, that
Mm.
actually motivated me and sort of brought together a sense of professional meaning and purpose around how I'd use my time from that point onwards. And haven't looked back.
And here we are. So, what was it that motivated you to start your podcast talking about digital health?
The podcast, it was a very sort of natural, organic process. I meet so many people in the industry because I wear a couple of hats. And over the years, I just have one too many times where I'd walk out of get together with somebody and think, wow, what a great conversation that was. And how good would it be? Yeah, you know what it's like when you have a great conversation with somebody and then you try and share it with somebody else.
Yes.
And you just never do. You never do it justice. You kind of miss something or a lot, or you don't say it the way that you heard it.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if I could bottle those conversations in some way and keep them? And that's what sort of led to becoming sort of more aware around the medium of podcasting. And that gave me what I wanted. It gave me the opportunity to bottle those conversations and be able to put them out there, and either for myself to go back from time to time and reflect on them, or for other people to share. And that sort of led to the bigger idea of actually engaging with a community of like minded people, not necessarily identical, but just like minded around the concept of what digital health can actually do,
Yes.
and digital first thinking, and how we could actually work together. But we have different perspectives around that theme. And I was keen to interact with people, record those conversations, and build a community in the process.
And you've done an amazing job.
It's been a fascinating journey. I've got to say, the first year I was questioning it because it was the sound of silence was pretty loud. You don't get a lot of feedback in the short term with
Mm.
podcasting, or at least that's been my experience. But we're entering the fourth year with it now. It's been downloaded in over 87 countries. On average, each episode attracts 400 downloads. And I'm getting lots of noise, lots of feedback coming back, and a lot of people engaging. In fact, a lot of opportunities have come out of it that I wasn't expecting, wasn't aware of, but it's been fantastic for both coreplus as well as HealthTechX as well, which I'm sure we'll touch on a
Yeah,
little bit later.
yeah. Awesome. What do you find people most struggle with in the digital health field?
I think the kind of classic human problems is generally what I would say. And what I mean by that is a lot of the customers I've dealt with over the years, their careers have focused them very much on their technical skills and clinical skills,
Mhm.
and being able to deal and support the workflows needed for that. So, healthcare is not, strictly speaking, constrained to just delivering healthcare services.
Mm.
It's got this business overlay and this wraparound. There's people to employ, there are taxes to pay, there's cash flow to be concerned about, there's marketing and worrying about those types of issues. So, I think that there are a lot of challenges in healthcare, but I think when you ask me that question, one of the more poignant things that pops up would be the challenges of being skilled in a certain discipline and then having to become this other skill set in the
Mm.
process, and dealing with the culture and the challenges of working with growing teams. I think they're kind of the bigger issues I've seen, broadly speaking, in the allied health community anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. You're trained in something and then you're jumping into something else thinking just because you can do that other thing well means that you'll be adept at running a business as well, which is, as you say, a totally different skill set.
It's a different skill set, and you have more than yourself to think about because
Mm,
you're employing people now. Plus, you're also trying to run your own life in the
mm.
process. So the amount of time and effort that goes into a healthcare business above and beyond delivering clinical services is real. It's a heavy workload to be taking on. And we hear about some of the things around the time impact and the personal impact on people, but I think translating that into systems,
Mm.
instilling templates that work and are effective and really improve the productivity, they're the kind of challenges that I think healthcare businesses mainly face. And they're actually areas where health tech can make a big impact in those areas as well.
What are you most curious about right now?
As in, as in this very second.
Yeah, well,
Um,
like in business, in what you're doing.
okay. In general terms, one thing that I'm more than curious about, I think I've developed a bit of an obsession with, is overlanding and adventure touring,
Oh,
and particularly with the idea of having a motor vehicle platform that can take you to places that are off the grid, but you could still stay connected with the world and be able to operate off the grid for a period of time, whether that's weeks or whether it's months. So I'm really curious about that idea, and I'm learning a lot about it at the moment.
my goodness. Your like breadth of interests is enormous, although that's still vehicle related, which was
It is beautiful.
so I
I probably won't
see
be
I see
just
the
about
link.
cleaning a 4x4 though. That's out in the wilderness somewhere.
But I guess what I would say about that too is your work does seem to span across a few different areas. So, in talking about how running a business can take over your life and mean that you don't have the balance that you might if you were a clinician, for example, how do you manage to balance and integrate your different interests and skills?
Well, I think I think I've just been able to. I think in patterns. I think is probably the simplest way to put it. And so I find patterns that are repeatable, and I put processes and systems around it. I know that sounds a little bit businessy and clinical, but I mean it's the right wording for it as far as I can tell. It's one of these things where I'm very disciplined in how I use my time and how I allocate my time in any given cycle, whether it's weekly or monthly or whatever the case is. So I make sure the things I value most are factored into those disciplines and those routines and schedules. And anything that is burning too much of my time, I'm looking for something to automate it, streamline it, reduce the amount of my time and effort that needs to go into it.
Yeah, I think there's so few people that think like that. So it's so fascinating to hear from you, and people, I'm
Well,
sure, can get a lot from it.
I'm making the assumption that we get sort of one go at life. Maybe we don't. Maybe there's more goes at it. I'm open minded to that. But assuming we get one go at it, I want to make the most of it.
Love it. Can you share any memorable experiences or challenge that you've faced so far during your career in innovation and digital health? We can talk about Core Plus now if you like.
Well, I think I will, because I think probably one of the most memorable things, and I guess when you talk about hacking health and assuming there'll be people listening who are starting something up or are interested in starting something up, I discovered a bit of a pivot in a sense to the foundation business plan for Core Plus. So the original idea, which is still a big part of it, was developing a core practice management system for initially psychology, and then that sort of extended out into the broader allied health. In those first few years, concentrating on things in and around what are core features in practice management, there were a number of kind of emerging innovative healthcare models that were developing, and they were very dialed into the idea of the internet and go-to-market strategies that related to search engine optimization, developing, in effect, sales funnels to be able to support people who were looking for healthcare around certain keywords. And it was really quite early days and innovative. And to me, when I saw that, it really expanded my consciousness around the idea of a marketplace and how that would actually work in healthcare. We've sort of heard about marketplaces with concepts like eBay, for example, Amazon. And we sort of understand that, or Freelancer or Fiverr, or depending on what, or Airbnb, for those people who probably haven't heard of the other ones. But the idea is that there's always somebody who represents a consumer who is looking for something, a good or a service. And then on the other side, there is supply. And in the middle, there's somebody who organizes that and brings the supply side and the demand side together. And that really fascinated me and really intrigued me at the time, because it wasn't in the original business analysis around the idea of coreplus. But what I was seeing is that healthcare, in particular, particularly digital health, was moving and would continue to move in a direction where we were kind of infusing the analog in-person healthcare model with digital touch points or digital experiences. And that would ultimately be a big challenge for anybody to embark on just at a go-to-market side. In other words, the B2C or business to consumer side of things. So that was an exciting pivot in the model where, by working with a number of innovative partners in those places, we were able to develop algorithms that supported a matchmaking process, for lack of a better term, that would take advantage of a provider network, a disparate, unaffiliated, independent provider network that could be matched to various needs coming through that particular provider's go-to-market strategy, and to be able to support them with the supply side. So that comes to mind, because that led to a real enhancement to the coreplus business model, particularly with our corporate clientele. And it's something that has grown quite substantially within the business since then.
So good to get those little nuggets. Technology is evolving rapidly. So how do you see technology like telehealth, for example, evolving and impacting healthcare accessibility in the coming years?
Okay, it's an interesting one. I think telehealth will, or should short term, will in the long run evolve beyond an online meeting. It's sort of the idea of just having video and chat,
Yeah.
and that's telehealth, is not really telehealth. I think what I would expect to happen in those areas would be there will be augmentation of devices, technology that will enhance the delivery of that service prior to, during, and after classical appointments. So in other words, a classic appointment would be health practitioner with patient, but there would be some augmentation and extension out into the world of the patient, where they're interacting with HealthTech devices,
Yes.
screens, cameras, things that will be able to do things like measure, obtain feedback, pick up on biometric data points that would effectively then be part of the healthcare that's being delivered. And to that extent, it will move the model of healthcare to something akin to an asynchronous service, something that is in part in person,
Yes.
but also happening when the practitioner is not there
Around.
as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's the real value of telehealth. That's the real promise of it. And we're yet to really fully unlock that. We've got a ways to go.
You're basically a health tech futurist, I think.
Or geek, one of the two.
Geek. What specific health tech innovations or developments have you found most exciting or promising in recent years, and why?
I think, just touching on what I was saying earlier about marketplaces, I think that's unlocked a enhancement to healthcare business models that go either full virtual
Mm,
or they're a hybrid
mm,
service delivery. That's going to be really good for Australians because it's allowing some of those lead players or early adopters in that kind of digital first healthcare service delivery, firstly, to really focus on very specific presenting issues for the community and just nail it and get that done really well. And, we've seen that in some of the femtech circles where there have been very, very niche go to market strategies around certain healthcare issues for women.
mhm.
And we've seen it with men's issues as well. So this is something that is needed in the community because there are still a lot of people who won't access healthcare in the conventional
Right.
ways.
Mm,
And so bringing the front door to healthcare and that sort of first part of the journey, let's call it, for lack of a better term, primary health,
mm,
into the lives, into the schedules, into the world of the consumer is something that I think is particularly exciting because at the end of the day, in a way, healthcare, at least for the time that I've been in it, everything old is kind of new again. It's
mm,
just that we're rehashing workflows with new technologies, so we hear about some of the buzzwords around technology that are evolving, like AI or whatever the case is. But
mm.
I don't think the tech is the exciting part. I think it sort of still comes down to delivering a service and extending a front door out into the worlds of individuals. And I think that's going to go a long way towards breaking down barriers
Mm.
around accessing healthcare. I think traditionally, unless you've been experiencing an acute healthcare issue, a lot of people do see healthcare sometimes as going outside of their normal. It's
Yeah.
sometimes it can be a bit of an inconvenience or a
Yes.
grudge purchase.
Yes.
And it really shouldn't be that. People need to be more integrated with their healthcare teams to get the best out of them and the best for themselves in their lives as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's an exciting potential around bringing it into the lives of people.
Health tech, as you know, and I know, often intersects with complex regulatory frameworks. What strategies do you recommend to startups or businesses in this space navigating these regulations while still pushing the boundaries of innovation? Because I think, the law is highly regulated, health is highly regulated. I find that innovating in highly regulated spaces can be challenging for people.
100%, Sarah. In fact, I would say that regulation most of the time is anti-innovation
Mm,
because what it what it achieves through all its good intentions is a constraint on
mm,
cultural evolution
mm,
because this is the way we do it and this is the way we have to do it. Otherwise, there's some sort of regulatory issue that
mm,
arises. And so that creates a disincentive for the healthcare workforce
mm,
to pursue innovation. It's kind of why would you when you might get slapped on the wrist or you may be faced with some unexpected risks,
mm.
just do what everybody has agreed is the way we do it. So I think it can be anti-innovation, but I do think that there's a spectrum across the different disciplines within healthcare where regulation is huge and a very
Mm,
high burden. So you might say general practice, for example, and hospitals and pathology and pharmacy and those kind of cohorts of service providers. But as we move towards mental health, musculoskeletal, diet, nutrition across different settings, the degree of regulation hasn't gotten that nuanced
mm,
yet. And guess what? We're seeing a lot more innovation in those areas and a lot more willingness of healthcare businesses to try things that perhaps traditional medical businesses have been a bit averse to. So I would say be careful as a startup founder in tracking regulations and trying to meet it
mm,
because what you might find is that the market doesn't agree with you that there's value in you complying with the regulation. So do so at your peril. Don't ignore it, but it may be something that you get to a little bit further down the roadmap. I think in the beginning, try and find that balance between serving your customer and the particular problem that they've got, and ensuring that you work with innovators in whatever market you're focused on, because they will usually have their requirements
mm,
up front and center. And if they're saying we must comply with this regulation, well, then you'll do that. But if they're not telling you that, fix the other problem first And then as your cash flow grows and your customer base grows, you can retrofit some of that compliance as and when necessary.
Good thinking. Not legal thinking, but you to be able to grow a business, you need customers. And yeah, if you need to get the money in to be able to be compliant in the first place, don't you? To be able to build. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's something that might sound counterintuitive to some, but IT is so secure these days out of
Yeah.
the box. When you work with cloud platforms, dealing with security per se, and dealing even with privacy to a greater extent, it's kind of addressed.
Mm.
So when I think about regulations, that's not what I'm describing. When I think about regulations, I'm thinking about the specific healthcare standards that relate to encapsulation of data, for example, or
Yes.
the definitions of certain data sets.
Yes.
You're not gonna really, in the early days anyway, in terms of startup, you're not going to introduce risks into your startup by putting those on the back burner for now. It just means that you're focusing on where the value is today. Meet the market where it's at.
Yes.
And if the market's telling you it needs you to comply with HL7 2.4, then do so, serve your customer. But if that's not important to them, then put it on the back burner for now and you'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So heading kind of in the direction that you just started, healthcare does often face the data security and patient privacy heavy regulations too. How do you see the industry addressing these concerns while still being able to embrace technological advancements?
Okay, so I think this one in the short to midterm is what's known in particularly in the government sectors around regulation is interoperability. I think that is key. What is it exactly? It's basically agreement and consensus between government and industry on what healthcare specific technical standards would support the sharing of healthcare information between practices.
Yes.
And in addition, to help establish a bona fide, high quality, up to the minute database, or let's call it a national directory of who, what, where, and how in healthcare exists around the country. So, in other words, every registered practitioner is immediately transparent and visible to any other registered healthcare practitioner when it comes to looking up who they are, where they are, what areas of specialization they have, and whether they are confined to in-person or telehealth or other types of ways of engaging with a patient that they're contemplating referring onwards into the healthcare system. So I think this is key because I think it's a big shortcoming in the Australian healthcare system where we have operated in a very siloed, independent way. We're kind of an interesting economy in healthcare because we get the majority of our funding from government on behalf of taxpayers, but the healthcare is delivered by private business on the main. And so every private business is focused on its own independent needs, which makes sense. But from an Australian standpoint, it's the healthcare system. It is one big organization. And so we need a system to be able to allow, technically, for that whole organization of healthcare to be able to work. And that's interoperability. That's the way I see it. I think it's here, it's now. It's just one of these things that we're still waking up as an industry around the opportunity of interoperability and federated directories in this country. And there's so many benefits if we get that right, because we'll be able to see a much better experience for Australians who are entering the healthcare system at one point and then being referred onto another point and then potentially referred onto another point. And so wouldn't it be great to have all those referrals just done by the system and all that healthcare information just shared by the system rather than pushing it back onto the patient to say, go off and organize it yourself. And ironically, Sarah, this goes back to the question you asked me earlier, which was what got me into this in the first place. Well, interoperability, as it's known today, is the solution to the problem that I encountered as an individual consuming healthcare. And that's why I'm a strong believer in it, strong proponent of it as well.
Yay. All right, we've got our final question. What advice would you have for individuals aspiring to make a significant impact in the field of health tech and digital health innovation?
Surround yourself with experience. Align as much as you need to. Go it alone at your peril. I've seen so many prospective founders and startup opportunities just not go anywhere because they just didn't engage with anyone. They didn't want to bring anybody else along. They didn't want to partner or align. Nobody's got deep enough pockets to go it alone. So collaboration is key. Know that you don't know. And remember that a small percentage of something is worth way more than 100% of nothing.
We're going to keep the conversation going in our private Facebook group, You Legal for Doctors. You're welcome to join us there.